And that's what childhood trauma does. And so we've identified, okay, it's important to work with. How do we actually heal it? Well, first and foremost, through the process of doing direct healing work, because childhood trauma can be supported with ERP, exposure response prevention, which is like exposure therapy, which is not to do with going into a healing journey, into the past, into memories, emotions, going into the experience of healing. But there are 3 things that are required in the healing experience. When you're doing a therapy session or breath work, whatever the actual mechanism that you're intentionally leaning into to support that trauma, those fragmented parts, there are 3 key aspects to it. The first one is that that fragmented part needs to feel safe enough and held enough by your own inner mother that they can feel what's happening, usually in the way of vulnerable emotions, like fear. I really feel the fear. I'm scared. Feel the sadness and the grief, and be with those more vulnerable emotions. That's a really important aspect of the healing journey. And there are a lot of doing that is not just about feeling. That's not how this box gets ticked. And if you really want to understand that more nuanced, watch Advanced Emotional Healing. That episode, I've already said that enough now, but I'd highly recommend that. However, in feeling the vulnerable emotion in a really healthy way, which requires safety, it requires someone to feel comfortable enough in their emotional body to go there. It requires someone to be in a state during that healing journey where they're regulated enough that that fragmented part, that exiled part, can sense that there's enough leadership there, there's enough solidity there from the inner mother to be able to hold. And I found this myself at certain times, like I've worked with certain space holders that I perceive feel uncomfortable with their own emotions, or they feel uncomfortable leading me into my emotions, and my emotion just doesn't come up. It just, I go into freeze because I can sense that the leader that's present to hold space for me doesn't have the capacity to hold space. And my fragile nervous system goes, no, I'm not going to feel that. How can I trust you or the situation for me to be in my deepest vulnerability if I don't perceive that you're grounded enough? Whereas when I see a really confident mother, the sort of mother that can love their child enough to not go into their own massive insecurities on a plane when the child's crying, and they have that really confident maternal capacity of soothing and nurturing and giving those affirming words like, hey baby, come here, it's okay, I got you, come here, it's all good, I've got you. And they are full enough and connected to their higher self enough to hold space for that. So that is really, really important. That is a big aspect of the healing journey. Once the memory has been identified and that exile part can come into the scenario, it doesn't always have to be by going into, there are different nuanced ways, but a flavor is that the exile part needs to come into the situation, that separated part that is holding onto that trauma and needs to be felt. So that's that. The next component, just quick action. Now we'll do this at the end. The next component is the inner father needs to come online. So we spoke about the inner mother being a function of unconditional love, and the inner mother does that through nurture, and that creates safety for the inner child to feel. The inner father also, as the second component as to what's important in the healing journey, is that the inner father needs to come online. And the inner father can support the traumatic memory by creating safety and protection for that inner child. And that looks like setting boundaries, being very strong. This is the dark masculine. Dark has got a negative association to that word, but it just means the protection, the one that can cut through, that can be firm and direct. And this is something that I discovered through doing some work with a psychotherapist, was when I first opened up to this idea. And then just by working with people and noticing that they don't incorporate this in their healings, is that, think of it this way. If there is a child in a house and the mother's home with the child and the father's overseas at work, someone breaks into that house. They've got a knife and they want to steal a bunch of things and they want to do harm. Now, if the mother's there with the child and the mother is soothing and nurturing and saying, hey, it's okay, you can feel these emotions. You can be here with this. You're so welcome as you are. I love you as you are. And they're nurturing the inner child as the inner child's in terror and fear. And then the child's crying and the mum's comforting the child. But then the perpetrator comes into the house and comes closer. And then the child starts screaming more and screaming and screaming, terrified for the child's terrified for its safety. And then the mum gets, I know this is quite a brutal example, but it's got merit in it. The mum gets stabbed. The perpetrator, I'm just going to say is a man, and stabs the mum. Now the child's there by themselves, and then the child gets stabbed. So the nurture's not enough for the child to feel safe, and the extent to what childhood trauma can look like in its more intense side of experiences is really, really scary situations, like sexual abuse. And just to be nurtured and held in that's not enough. The child also needs to energetically and emotionally and practically know that the father is there to protect them. And that's a very different energy to the emotional healing through the feminine. The emotional healing through the feminine is so important, but by itself, the inner child won't feel fully safe.